All this happened in South Africa when I was 12. We had just moved into a mansion of a house that we bought for bargain because the house wasn't finished yet. The house didn't have any carpets or wardrobes yet and needed some finishing touches, so my parents decided to buy it and finish all the remaining stuff while we lived in the house. And because the area was a bit isolated, my parents wanted our caretaker and his wife to move into the guest house, because we still lived a long way from there and it would be better to have someone present. Albert, the caretaker's wife's name was Agnes, and she was our nanny. She basically helped raise me and my two brothers, so I knew her pretty well. That's why on a moving day I could feel something was wrong with Agnes. She was cold and seemed paranoid, and it didn't seem at all like her warm, loving self. So that night, while she was giving my baby brother a bath, I asked her what was wrong. Agnes wasn't a belly woman, and we would usually talk hours about her culture and stories of her people, so when I asked her what was up, she told me the truth, something that a little boy shouldn't have heard. She told me that since the 2 weeks she and Albert had been living there, strange things had been happening. She said that at night there were horrible screams coming from the house, and that at around 2 in the morning Albert would see the flickering of bright lights moving from one room to another in the house, which is even stranger because the house was without electricity at the time. She told me that 2 nights before we moved in, Albert went out somewhere, and she was alone at the house. At this time my dad had sorted out the electricity problem, and she was watching TV waiting for Albert to get home, when she started hearing movements outside. She turned the TV off to listen more carefully, possibly assuming Albert had returned. She heard the noises outside getting louder and more obnoxious with the sound of things being broken. Scared, she sat helpless on her bed, with no real way to call for help. This was before everyone had a cell phone. She was filled with fear when the noises started coming from the outside of the front door, the guest house, and her bedroom window. She described it as prolonged scratches against the front door and window, and this being Africa, it could have been an animal of some sort, but as she told me the story, her eyes turned red. She said something started calling out to her, calling her Tandega, and Bella name her mother used to call her when she was a little girl. Albert came home moments later to find strange deep stretch marks all over the front door and Agnes crying and praying on the bed. So my first night there, I was rather stressed and I wasn't really sure what to expect, but surprisingly, I had a great night's sleep. Nothing happened. Everything went great for a month or so, until one morning my mother awoke to find muddy footprints all over the house and even in my room. Nothing was stolen or broken into, so I had no real explanation for it. Nothing strange happened for another 4 months, and that's the night that still haunts me. The school had been arranged a week long. Weld School, which is almost like the Boy Scouts, where everyone in our grade will spend some time in the bush to get some survival skills. The night before the Weld School I was really excited. I could hardly sleep. My room was in the furthest point of the house, right next to both of my younger brother's rooms. Our rooms formed the ending part of a really long hallway on the first floor, with the kitchen being the opposite side of the hallway, and with the house being so large you can easily hear echoes coming from the other parts of the house. My parents slept on the top floor on the opposite side of the house. That night I was lying in the bed trying to sleep. I had awoken at about 2 a.m. by a loud noise, and I was struggling to get back to sleep. I started hearing faint footsteps down the hall, coming from somewhere in the kitchen. I heard the rattling of the plates and dinnerware, so I thought one of my parents were having a midnight snack or something. So I slowly peered down the long, pitch-black hallway to maybe try and see if a light was on or something in the kitchen, but there was nothing. The only light in the hallway at the time came from my room and the bathroom. Convincing myself I'm hearing things, I climbed back into the bed and tried to sleep. A few minutes passed and I started hearing the footsteps again, this time louder and coming closer to me. The footsteps were slow-paced but loud. I got up immediately after hearing it again, looked down the hallway, but saw and heard nothing. I climbed back into bed, shit scared, and the footsteps started again. But this time it was really close, and the second pair of softer footsteps also started. But this almost sounded like someone was running up and down the hallway. Lying in my bed, not being able to believe what's happening, I got up to look down the hallway again, but everything stops as soon as I got up. I saw only darkness down the hallway, but I got this feeling looking down the pitch-black hallway that something was looking back at me and waiting for me to get back into bed. I got back into bed, this time with a cricket bat, not knowing what to expect. I heard the footsteps entering my doorway to my room, and what seemed to be like genius move at the time, I threw the duvet covers over my head and body and pretended to sleep. I heard someone coming into my room. I heard the sound of heavy breathing and could distinguish a shadowy figure when I peeked through a part of my blanket. It reached out and grabbed my leg through the duvet covers, reached around my entire ankle. In a moment of bravery, I grabbed the cricket bat and threw it off the duvet covers, ready to confront whatever. In that moment, whatever it was had disappeared, and the feeling around my ankle slowly faded away. From time to time, I would find strange scratches and bite marks on my body. Years later, my mother would tell us she experienced similar things in that house, but she didn't tell us because she didn't want us to be afraid.